All right, so we're live. So everyone, welcome. We welcome you if you're joining us virtually as well or physically in the store. I am Isaac Alicia. I'm a rising senior at Howard University studying business management. You know, that's right. So today we're chatting with Reginald Williams. He is a certified, award-winning speaker, educator, author, and black man. And it's very special when you have a combination of all of those things. And just speaking to you, in the past 30 minutes, I've been able to pick up that you do a lot more than those as well. So I'm excited to get this conversation going. So today we're going to be talking about your book, A Marginalized Voice. And a big, big part of this book is the concept of identity. So would you like to introduce yourself and share a bit about your identity and your background?
Wow, that, that is an amazing question. I thank you, first of all, to all who have made this possible. Thank you. And I always give the ancestors I praise because I stand on their shoulders. But New York born, North Carolina bred, just a country boy who grew up in the most southern part of North Carolina. And I got a sense of who I am by the men of that community. And these were what we call unlearned men because they didn't have education. A lot of them, they didn't get past third, fourth grade education, but their wisdom and their knowledge was amazing. And I just soaked that up. And I didn't realize growing up just how infected I was by their presence and their hands on me and their example. So, at the end of the day, you can give me all the titles that you want to give me, but I'm just a country boy, man, trying to be half the man that my grandfather was.
Right. So that's a great segue just into the book overall. You touched on the men in the community that you had growing up, but you also used the word like infected, right? So when I think of infected, I think of like contagions and things that we contract from those around us. So that's a large part of what this book touches on. How do we see ourselves through how we've been touched by those around us? And so, can you just tell us a little bit about, why you decided to, write this book and how you got into writing itself? Did you get into writing first and then have the idea for this book, or did you identify that there is a need for this book and you just jumped in and became that change that you wanted to see? How did this book come about for you?
Well, actually, I was a writer first. And for those in the DC area who may know, I was a journalist and then eventually an editor for the Afro American newspaper, which is, I don't know, 150 some odd years old. So I actually began writing first. And it's interesting, you got Barbara Dick Gregory up here. And I had an opportunity as a result of working at the Afro to be on stage with Mr. Gregory, and it was just he and I. And so, we're across from each other, and I'm like, I'm just amazed that I'm in his space. And during the commercial break, he turns to me and he says, "Young man, you need to write a book." And I'm like, wow, like, it stunned me again because somebody of that stature, that knowledge. And so that was probably 2005, 2006 when we had that conversation. Um, but I am a behavioral health consultant, educator, used to do direct services. And in that space, working with I actually started out working with men. I started working with men because everybody else was working with youth. So I was like, well, since everybody's working with youth, I want to work with men. And subsequently, what I found out very early in the game is that I'm working with these men who are chronologically adults, but emotionally they're still children because they're caught and not understanding their identity. And so after about 10 to 12 years of doing that, sometimes you carry that weight of all that you've experienced. And I didn't intend to write a book. I just intended to get some thoughts on paper because that's what I do a lot of times. I'm not a journaler, but when something is heavy on my mind, I'll just write it down. I'll put it away. And so I probably wrote about 4 chapters of the book, not really knowing that it was a book, but maybe knowing that it was, kind of that crossroad. And I took those 4 chapters and I put it in a bag and put it under their desk, and it sat there for about 3 years. And then somewhere, I just heard this voice, I guess from God, who says, yo, you need to finish the book. And I wasn't quite sure what book he was talking about, but eventually it came to me. And so it's just, it's the experiences of going in courtrooms, the experience of going in prisons, the experience of working with men that exist in that book.
And has that always been your path? Have you always been a leader and a mentor? Or did you start, like we talked and you told me that you also majored in business management. So did you ever like try a corporate path and realize like that wasn't for you? Or, how did you figure out that this is what you wanted to do?
So actually, when I graduated, that's exactly where I went. I worked on Wall Street for a few years, and then after leaving Wall Street, I got into promotions. Um, I was promoting stuff, events in New York, because at that time I'd gone back to New York, and I was promoting things in New York, and then I eventually moved back to North Carolina, where I started a production company, and it did really well, but I got to a point where I got tired of it. But one of the things that had happened, this is really where my writing career started. I wanted to be known as an expert in the area of music from a business point of view. So I began to write articles on the aspect of business in music, because music is 90% business and 10% music. And most people who get into the music business don't understand that. So that's how my writing career started. And then when I moved here, it just kind of grew and blossomed. But the way that I got involved with this goes back to that word, infected, because my grandfather and the men around me had this aura over me that I didn't recognize, and I just began to do what I had seen. Because my grandfather, and I say this all the time, I've said this 1,000 times, and if I live long enough, I'll say it 1,000 more. My grandfather, with a 6th grade education, is the greatest therapist I've ever known. People with pastors, preachers, politicians, and PhD would come to his house to sit at his table to have conversations with him before they would make their next move. And I would watch that and be amazed.
Wow. So I would love to ask more about, what that impact was on you, but just like 5 minutes ago, I told you that I sense that we have a lot in common. And it's just crazy to me because I'm actually at the beginning of my career trying to start my own music businesses as well.
Wow.
So it's the fact that you just like mentioned that like that was your focus and that was your start, like that just really resonated with me because that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to start my own recording studios here in DC, and I see music also being like 92% business, 8% music, because it's all about the resources and the opportunity that we have. And a lot of times people don't even have a microphone to record that music unless they sell their soul to the industry. And that really is affecting our culture because we absorb the music that we listen. And a lot of times, like you mentioned in the book, if we don't have that figure to turn to and to look to, all we'll have is this music that's telling us that who we are killers and robbers, and that's who we'll believe that we are. So if that's what's being pushed, that's what will be being received. But if we push music about education, music about uplifting our families out of poverty, and positive energy, then that's how we can begin to heal our community. So you also touched upon music in your book about being therapeutic, as art as therapy. So before we get back to your grandfather, I just want to ask you, what is your music style? What did you learn from the music business, and what does music do for you on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the first thing I learned from the music business is that it's a crooked enterprise, which goes back to the point that you were trying to make. When corporate dollars get into something, oftentimes it corrupts it. So, but in terms of music, in terms of who we are as people, no matter who we are, we have to think about our senses: what we smell, what we see, what we touch, what we hear, right? And so the soundtracks that we listen to have a powerful effect on how we move about. For me, every morning I get up, I go on my back porch and I listen to the birds. That's my soundtrack.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? That's my music. That's how I start my day every day, listening to those birds. So, what it is that you listen to will have an effect on how you move out. With my kids growing up, I had no problem with them listening to any kind of rap that they wanted to listen to. And the reason why I had no problem with them listening to any kind of rap that they wanted to listen to is because I was feeding their senses with so many other things that even if they were listening to bad rap, it was not going to overtake them. And, as my kids were growing up, the rap that wasn't necessarily positive rap or good rap or, empowering rap, they never bought into it. And it wasn't because I said to them not to buy into it. It's because I gave them other things to also listen to. So, I'm a kid. I'm a child of the '60s. So I am hip hop. Right? I tell the youngers all the time, "You're not hip hop. I am." But
New York born too.
in New York born too. So it's in my roots. So between hip hop in those early days, Motown. I still love Motown. I love a little Celtic music. I'm not big on opera, but I saw Mesa from Baltimore sing it one time. I was like, "Ooh, I think I like opera." But yeah, I just anything that appeases the ear, I'm for it. So I'm not prejudiced or I don't put anything in a box.
No, I can definitely tell you're hip hop just by the way you say it. Like you said, I'm hip hop, and it's like you got that bounce to it. So I know you're not lying. So that's awesome because when I was in high school, I was really struggling with my academics. Like I mentioned to you that I went to a boarding school, majority white in the middle of nowhere in Connecticut. I was, far from my family, living in a dorm with other students, but really was on my own for the most part, trying to live independent ever since I was like 14. And I figured out that if I listen to gospel music when I wake up in the morning, it allowed me to have a clear mind throughout the rest of the day. So I definitely feel what you mean when you talk about like going outside and listening to the birds. Um, that is definitely a luxury. I live right now. I'm living in the heart of DC, so if I went outside in the morning, I would just hear sirens and all kinds of craziness.
And that's not natural. That's not natural. But I'm sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah.
we were doing a workshop. This young man right here is somebody I've worked with for many years. I have much respect for him. But we were doing a workshop one time, and we were talking about violent activities in this workshop. And this one particular brother had spent some time in jail, for violent activity. And I asked him, what was he listening to before he committed the crime? And he told me he was listening to rap music. I said, what would happen if you were listening to gospel music? I just asked the question. He said, I probably wouldn't have committed the crime. So it has an effect on us.
No, it really does. So I'm curious to know, you mentioned that you were feeding your kids other things than, the negative stereotypes of hip hop, so much so that those stereotypes wouldn't affect them. I'm curious to know what some of those kind of things are. Like you mentioned, not only just hearing, but like sight, touch. So, how did you indoctrinate your children in a way to grow up with that fortitude of, knowing themselves and their spirit enough where it couldn't be affected by that negative energy?
Well, one of the things is my family on both sides. My mother was one of 13 children. My father was one of 15 children, right? And our family, both of our families, is very close knit. So they basically just had the identity of both my side, my mother's side of the family, as well as my side of the family. The other thing was, again, I disengaged him. My son was in was a rhetorical contest, and my daughter was in theater, and she was a track star, and she swam, and my son, who now is a basketball coach in Arkansas, he was in the basketball, and then always coming from the South, you got to go to church, you can hang out on Saturday night, but you got to go to church on Sunday morning, right? And the activities that they had there, and then again, it's just and this is something I also mentioned in the book, right? I can't father alone, right? I need to have the will of other good men. So, and again, I just write this perspective for black boys, for black boys, I write this perspective. A lot of this also applies to girls, but I'm speaking for black boys. But I just had to have other men around me. So I had to make sure that my children were always around good things. And I won't mention any names, but again, playing basketball, I had the opportunity to play with and against some great NBA players, and I was able to bring my son in front of those players, and that didn't impact him. And then the last thing was my son had an ailment where he had to have part of his lung taken out, and he had that done at Duke University. and a lot of the basketball players would come through to watch the kids. So he had all these different influences, and so he's a basketball coach in Arkansas. His wife, who's a Hall of Fame basketball player, is a basketball coach. So he's just done all what he has seen all his life.
That's what's up, man. We love a Hooper family for sure. And I just also want to echo the sentiment that this book is written for black men, black boys, but I would personally recommend it to everyone. I would recommend it to black women who want to know how to, speak to and learn how to care for black boys and black men. I would recommend it to educators, in the teaching space. It teaches you how to connect so that you're able to teach. So for me personally, I'm a teacher as well, so I've been teaching high school age students this whole summer. And we've been going over some very advanced concepts. So the summer camps that I do, we teach, artificial intelligence, data analytics, cybersecurity, like urban agriculture and supply chain. But you're not going to be able to teach them anything if you don't connect with them first, if you don't meet them where they're at, because you need to be able to understand them so that they can understand you. And that's one thing that I've really learned, over this summer is like understanding is critical for learning. And so, just going back to the topic, throughout your experience with working with men, what have been some techniques that you would like to share, or some things that you've learned over the years to really build that connection so that you can do what you do best?
A lot of times, again, another great question. A lot of times when there are issues with young men, and I get that call, they call me like I'm the dog whisperer or something. Like I can just walk in and I can make things happen, and I can't. My tool is to go into a situation and learn. My tool is to go into a situation and listen, right? Because a lot of times nobody has listened. My tool is to connect, and the greatest way to connect is to hear them out, right? And so there's an exercise I do, but I won't do it. But there's a situation where I have 7 words, and those 7 words mean one thing. I take those same 7 words in the same order, and I put them on another line, but I put 2 commas in those words in that sentence, and the 2 commas changes the sentence completely, right? So my theory, the way I work is to walk into every situation and try to find the comma, because if I can find the comma, then I have an ability to connect with that client. So I don't have any secret. I need to learn.
So basically, that comma is context, like finding that context.
There you go. Because there could be situations that look just alike, but the context, there's something contextually that will make it differently. And if you spend the time to find it, you'll know, right? Because one thing I found out about kids, man, they can peep the BS. Right? They can peep who's real,
see right through,
and they can peep the BS, right?
Absolutely.
And so when you walk in the room and you're in the authority, and you walk in the room and I've done this, and you walk in the room and this is my title, and you walk in the room and I'm not going to listen to you, you're not going to get anything.
That's real. If anything, yeah, you're not gonna get any connection at all. But I really agree with you in saying that learning is a lifelong experience, and that's really at the core of who we are as human beings. We're curious by nature. We're intuitive by design. And so that's really the best thing that we do is we learn. And so I encourage you all to learn more. I encourage you all to read. So I gotta plug the book. Definitely suggest that you buy this book before you leave today. But is there any section of the book that stands out to you, or anything that you would like to read for the audience to kind of get a feeling of your writing style? When I was reading your book, I really felt as though like your writing was more like speaking. It felt like a conversation, even though I was just reading it, here in the store on the bus between traveling. It really felt like it was a prompt, like suggestive writing. So
right.
Is there any part of the book that really stands out to you, like you're most proud of?
I don't know. I'm gonna be a little controversial here. And, I don't know that I would say that one chapter is more powerful. I'm more powerful with one chapter than the other. But I'll tell a story. And when I finished, initially I had only 8 chapters. And I sent the book to the first editor because I had 3 different editors. And the first editor I chose for a few different reasons. One, phenomenal writer, and very radical. And I wanted, and was a former pastor, right? And I say former because he was a little bit too revolutionary for me. So I sent the book to him because I knew that he would be able to, kind of cross the I's and dot the T's in terms of content, right? And he said to me, you can't publish this book without speaking about the church, the black church.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. So I ended up writing this chapter 9, which was called The Least of These, right? And I fight with a lot of different people in church, right? Because the reality is this: the church is missing in action as it relates to the development of black boys.
Yep.
And so, again, I don't have one chapter that I favor more than the other, but that was a controversial chapter. And also, I got a lot of pushback from therapists. The chapter, which I think is chapter 8, is called treadmill therapy, because a lot of times the fact that you've gone to school and you've become a therapist, and the fact that you've been licensed by the state to be a therapist, does not mean that you're qualified to provide therapy for these black boys, because a lot of times you don't understand their issues.
Well, that's a great way to, lead back to your grandfather, right? You said, he had limited education, but, in his environment, in his community, he was the one that people sought out. So what were his characteristics? What made him who he was, to the point where people wanted to speak to him?
For me, as I look back, patient. Again, I don't know that I ever heard him tell somebody what they were supposed to do. I don't know that he ever said, well, if it was me, I would do this. He would always ask questions. They would say something, and he would ask a question. And I know when he would do it to me, it would piss me off. Like, yo, I asked you a question, give me an answer. Yeah. And he would ask me a question. And the reason that he would do that, and again, this is me kind of thinking, because I never had a conversation with him, was that he was trying to get you to think. And as I have gone to school and, going through my classes, I found out that, or the theory that I take is allow them to talk long enough so that they can come up with their own solutions. And so if you ask the right questions and you ask it in the right way, oftentimes you can get them to see from their perspective, right? Because for me, I don't want to be the solution. I'm not going to be your solution when you do well, and I'm not going to be your tragedy when you do bad. Yeah. But what I'm going to do is try to help you best I can by asking you the right questions and pushing the envelope in such a way that it'll make you think and come up with the answer.
That's really powerful, because I remember I literally told my roommate last night, I'm not here to be any solution for you. I'm just here to help you do it. And like living in DC, like you come across a lot of trauma for real, but just knowing that like you have that brotherhood in that community, it allows you to attack and solve by going through it and not being stuck without any confidence in yourself. Because when you prompt people to use their own brain, that's how they learn that they're capable.
That's right.
And you talk in your book, like having that self-awareness is key, because when you don't, you're just vulnerable to what the world says you are. And the world, it does everything in its power to, keep us uneducated and keep us down, because, the scariest thing is the educated black man.
Absolutely.
And so, just having that confidence as well is really the key. So, this has been a great conversation. I want to give the audience a chance to ask any questions if there are any questions. But if not, we could just keep the conversation going. So, talk to me a little bit about your experience with speaking. We do have a question.
Yeah, I do have The art on the cover of the book, was that from here or from whoever?
When you said no, the art on the book was harder. It was harder to come up with the art than it was to write the book. I probably went through 4 or 5 different artists, and actually the concept as it is wasn't the original concept that I had, but the artist that I eventually chose came up with something. I said we can work it out, and so it's a very I had to make some changes. But if you look at the cover, you'll see one eye has a scar on there, and the scar represents the scars of a young black boy, and then the other eye, has a blood-stained tear coming down, right? So, and then the way that the discoloration of the face is, this talks about the trials and tribulations that young black boys go through. And the artist initially had the dude, like he had just come from a beauty salon, man. His hair was really crazy. Nah, I need dreads or locks. And I said the reason why I needed to have locks is because, the world looks at black men with locks as being dangerous. So I just wanted to, it was hard. It took me probably took me 6 months to write, and probably took me a year and a half, almost 2 years to come up with the cover.
Yeah, it is a powerful cover, and it's definitely attention grabbing too. Like I mentioned, my roommate earlier, he actually came into the store today, saw the cover, and he was like, "Wow, that looks like me." So definitely commend you on the cover too.
Thank you.
Covers go a long way. So we have another question.
Yeah. So first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you because you had so much wisdom, and I know where that wisdom came from because you told us where it came from.
There you go.
So I appreciate that perspective. And the fact Dick Gregory told you to write a book, and now you did it, that's amazing. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, how old were you when that happened? Because right now I'm 25, I'm in grad school right now. I'm really starting to think, how am I going to make my impact on the world? And I'm thinking about being a writer too. I write, I wouldn't call myself a writer yet, but I'm thinking about being a writer too. So I wanted to ask, how old were you when that happened, you got that message?
Well, let me start here. You are a writer.
That's what people tell me.
You don't
Come on now.
You don't need to have somebody validate we all want to be published, right? But an idea, before you could become a writer on paper, you have to become a writer in thought. And I need for the language that you speak and that you hear is positive language. So you are a writer. So we'll start there.
That's real.
All right. So now you're gonna make me give up my age, right? So it was about 10, 12 years ago. And so right now I'm 63 years old. Right, so I was in my 50s when he told me that.
And so you were talking about having kids who were basketball coaches and stuff. I was like, are you old enough to have kids now?
Yeah. Well, I started when I was 2, man. I really but now, my oldest is 44. Yeah. My oldest is 44 with 3 grandchildren. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned about the music industry. So did you used to work in the music industry? How was you connected?
So what happened was I ran a promotion company, and I ran this promotion company in New York, but I would run to North Carolina often because that's my home. And my college roommate, he was dating this young lady. And the young lady had a cousin who said she could sing. And he's like, well, can you help her? I was like, well, I don't do that. I'm in promotion. Like, that's a whole different thing. I said, no, but she really can sing. I said, well, I don't do that, right? And I heard her sing. I said, I'm in the music business. But so basically, I created my own music company, my own production company, and we did drop some music for radio stations and things of that nature. Corporate videos, but also this particular young lady who really could sing. We had some major label interests, but the deal wasn't a good deal. And I understood the deal wasn't a good deal because I understood the business of music. It was another thing dealing with a family who thought I was hijacking her. But anyway, so I have my own company.
So I hear a lot about in order for you to get in the music industry, you gotta sell your soul, do rituals and. What do you do? Do you think everybody? Is that true? To be in the music industry, you have to sell your soul or whatever?
I won't get into, you got to find out what they mean when they say selling their soul. But here's, if I have to come to you to get money to put this project up, then I have to move by whatever you say I have to do. And a lot of times I'll do that because I'm trying to get that bag. And so in that aspect, we could say they're selling their soul. And it's interesting, I just saw a video this morning, somebody, I can't remember the brother's name, but he was going at all these rappers who were selling their catalogs. And he was asking, what business person sells their business to get money? Do you own a Chick-fil-A and then sell your Chick-fil-A to get money? So you don't have the autonomy that you need. And so for me, everything I do is about me. And so I never wanted to sign any deals. I always believe I have the ability to take it to the level that I need to take it. If I can't get any further, then that means I wasn't supposed to be there.
Right. That's exactly how I feel too. So I'm at the beginning process of that, but my perspective on it is that if you're creating any art, it comes from somewhere, and that's your spirit, that's your soul. So in order to monetize it, I mean, you could look at it like you're selling parts of your soul, but as soon as you give someone else the power and the say so over how it's distributed and what you need to do for them, then you don't have control over your art, which is in turn like pieces of your soul that you brought into the physical space. But a lot of times people, when they think about the music industry, they think mainstream industry, but there's so many different ways that you could exist in the music business, but not as part of the corporate industry. It's not just a corporate function. You could build your own community. You could have your own audience that you've built, that you are able to still have your own independence, right? You could really connect with people on a deeper level and have them come out to your shows, to the point where you don't need that record label, you don't need that deal for distribution, because you've connected with enough people where you could sustain a living just by expressing yourself and sharing that expression. So I always encourage people to express themselves as much as they can, because it's an outlet. There For me, like when I make music, I use it as a form for me to express myself in a way that I feel like I can't with words. And a lot of times, like when we look at this book, you know, young black boys are told, be strong, don't cry. And that's something that I learned from a very early age. So when I was growing up, I played football, ever since I was 4 years old. My dad was the head coach. And so for me, I was always taught to be tough. When I would get hit, I was told not to cry. And that existed beyond football. Like, I was told not to cry in the house. Like whenever I got hurt or I was upset, I learned to just bottle those things up. And so as I grew up with that kind of, mindset, it became very hard for me to feel any emotions, because whenever there's something that is presented to me, the way that I look at it isn't emotionally but logically. Like, how can I solve this problem, or is it in my control? If it's not, then the only thing that I can control is how I react to it. And a lot of times the way I react to it is just by not reacting at all. And so it's become very difficult for me to express myself unless it's creativity and like through music. And so just like going back to the book, that's another big concept, is like how young black boys are always taught, this like toxic masculinity that you brought up. And that also brings up the mask on the cover and how we're forced to wear this mask. So would you like to touch on that a little bit more, and how like we've all kind of grew up in this system where our emotions are invalidated in a way?
Sure. So let me just say this to young man. Let's change from books. Let's change from music business to books, right? I'd rather be in Sankofa's bookstore than Barnes and Noble, because if I'm in Barnes and Noble, I'm a part of the corporate track race. Whereas at Sankofa, I have a personal relationship with Isaac and with Christina and with Michaela, And so that's important for me to build that tribe, no matter how small it is, because them knowing me and me knowing them has more value to my spirit than me being with Barnes and Nobles, who I'm just whoever. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, the autonomy of owning your own for me is much better than having a corporate relationship. For me, to be honest with you, they're pimps. That's just how I look at it. But anyway, to your point, I call it, I say the greatest rules that the young boys learn is big boys don't cry. And so what happens in that theory right there is you're teaching me at the earliest age that I must compress my feelings. And so now at whatever age, at 1 year old or 2 years old, you're telling me not to cry, right? That I don't have the right to embrace who I am or what I feel, then I'm going to live the rest of my life like that. So when I got this tool to your head, I don't care about you because I've lived most of my life not even caring about me, right? If I don't know how to emotionally express myself in a way that's not dangerous, then how can I not be dangerous to you, right? And so we have to get outside of this big boys don't cry, right? I'm not telling you should cry everywhere, but you have to allow a person the opportunity to express who they are, express their hurt. And I tell the story in the book where I'm playing basketball in the league game and I go up for a jump shot and then I crack my right? And it's the worst pain ever. And I'm screaming and I'm hollering, I'm cursing, and the lady walks over to me and she says, "Sir, I know you're in pain, but can you not curse?" And what do? I was like, "F you," like, because I'm in pain. So if I'm in pain, I don't care that you're in pain, right? And so, then she says, "We're calling the ambulance." And I'm thinking, well, who's giving you permission to call this ambulance, right? But she can see because my leg is, so she's calling the ambulance. And the first thing I say to her is like, "Nah, I'm all right," right? That's the direct result of growing up as a kid, not crying. Because the ignorance of that statement was, I said I was all right because I didn't want to be vulnerable to the people, because this was a league game, so there were people in there. I didn't want to be vulnerable to these people. But hell, they had already seen me screaming and cursing, so they already knew I was hurting. So yeah, we have to get outside of that space of not allowing, boys to express their true feelings.
Right, and then it gets to a point too where that pain is really the only thing you can feel because you're so used to expressing, or you're so used to holding back your emotions so much that the only thing you can feel is at the most intense and the most extreme levels of whatever emotion. So you begin to seek out those extreme scenarios because that's how you know that you're still human in a way. So you had a question?
First of all, that was an amazing response. Someone online has a question for you, Reginald.
Okay.
Do you think the strategies listed in your book can be applied to African students versus African American students? By the way, this is a great conversation.
Well, thank you, and that's a great question. I'm gonna go with the I don't know, but let me give a little story behind it. I was interviewed by I don't remember what country it was. I was interviewed by someone from another country, and it was strange that they would interview me. But in having this conversation, they were saying that the things that was applicable in my book was also applicable to black boys in that country as well. And it kind of shocked me, right? And so I don't know the dynamics, of the different African spaces or African countries, but I just believe as black boys, we probably live in many ways the same no matter where we are. So I would say yes, but that's just an educated guess.
Question. So I have 3 sons of my own, and I'm in the same space with you can cry to express yourself. You can't whine. You don't do whining, okay? You're not getting your way. That's different. Yeah, that's different. You definitely can cry. But when you see a man cry, how do you feel about that? Because it's still some deprogramming we have to do. Because I can say, men should be able to cry, and I do say that. Mm-hmm. But when I actually see it, that program's still in me. Like, man, go somewhere and do that. In the dark or something. Don't cry in front of all of us.
Nah, you got to deprogram yourself, bro. Because for me, it's good because the one thing I know when he's crying is that he's authentic, right? The vulnerability to be able to cry in a bunch of men, in front of a bunch of men, is an amazing strength, right? And so, you know I love you to life, D, right? But that's about you changing your thought process. For me, it's cathartic, man, because, if he's crying and I see him crying and I embrace the fact that he's crying and I come over to him, that's connection.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I go through the
I know
motions.
you go through the motion, but then back.
Because when men cry in front of everyone, it makes the whole room cry. It's a different emotion when you see a man cry versus a woman cry. Because you're not expecting a man to cry, right? So it takes, I've just been in a situation where it just takes the whole room.
And they've probably been waiting all their life to experience that. We, at one of our classes, and you may not have been there on this class, right? But long story short, we run these classes every Monday night, and not anymore, but we used to run these classes every Monday night. Brothers coming from all types of situations. And on the very first night, which is the second Monday in September, this guy gets up and he says, in front of a class full of men who he does not know, that his uncle had molested him. And I remember thinking, bro, you don't know these men. You don't need to be saying this to these dudes, right? And here's what happened. After the class was over, someone came up to him and said, thank you, because I felt like I was the only person in the world that had happened to. His truth freed somebody. And we have to learn to get in the space, man, where we can. The greatest gift that we can give, other than love, is the ability to free somebody from something. So, yeah, embrace it.
And what we're talking about here really boils down to authenticity. That's one of the most important things too. Is love, but also authentic love.
Mm-hmm.
You need to understand that you have the power to change your environment, affect the world that's around you. And so it starts by being your authentic self, because if you try to fit into a mold that someone is telling you that you are, you try to, change yourself to make other people comfortable, then your environment will react to that. And everything around you won't be authentic, won't be real, because you're not being real first. And so that's something that, I take, very seriously, is just always trying to be authentic, even when it's not the popular opinion. Because if you're wrong, you can be wrong, but you'll learn. You'll make the mistake, but you'll learn. But if you're not being your authentic self, then everything that you're receiving isn't going to be authentic, because it's touching you when you're not being yourself. So it's touching an alternate version of who you are trying to be. So always be yourself, and that leads me into the next part of this conversation I want to ask you about. We've been touching a lot about how black men are affected all around the world by these different stereotypes and these different concepts. But let's talk about the solutions, right? What are some of the solutions that we need to change this culture?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, like, if it's like we don't know how to express it, like we're told we can't cry, we can't say certain words or languages or whatever. It's like, how can we like vent? Like if we having a bad day, like working, somebody cussed us out, it's like naturally you want to say certain words that express how we feel. You see what I'm saying? It's like what is the solution? Yeah.
So again, so the solution is just to do something different. So if somebody curses me out, my natural instinct is, there's this thing I used to always say, right? Especially in the group, again, that he and I work with, right? I come with peace, but I'm prepared for war, right? So, but if someone curses me out, my first inclination is like, yo, dude, do you really want to smoke? That's my thought process, right? But there are times when I go over there, yo, bro, you good? Right? And a lot of times, this you good is the first time they've heard somebody ask them, are you good? And they'll break them down. I'm not going to say that happens all the time, but we just got to do something different, right? Because we know that if we react the way we've always reacted, we already know what we're going to get, right? So you just got to be willing. Look, you have to be willing to walk into a space and be you and have everybody dislike the fact that you're you and be comfortable that you're you. And a lot of times we can't be that because we're not comfortable with somebody not liking us or not agreeing with us, right? I am unapologetically me, right? My name is Reginald Williams. I have no middle name. My wife has given me the middle initial of A for raw. Sometimes A stands for uphold. Sometimes, so I have absolutely no problem. And again, that's a result of the environments I grew up in because both sides of my family, I got 7 uncles on one side and 6 uncles on another side, and they were all like, yo, this is me. And that's who I am. I was told I never met my great grandfather. My grandfather was born in 1910, which means I'm assuming that his father was probably born in 1880 or 1890, somewhere around there. But they tell me that my great grandfather, white men feared him. And we're talking in early 1900s. That's unheard of, right? So you just got to be willing to walk into a space and be who you are and not care about who doesn't understand it or like it. As long as you're being truthful and you're trying to do something that makes change, because change causes tension, and tension is not good for a lot of people.
And what it takes to get to that point too is self-mastery. So when I was in high school, I studied a lot of philosophy. I was really interested on how people, approach the world. Philosophy is, different practices that people found in their lives to help understand, what the world is and our place in the world. And so I did a lot of reading on philosophy, and the one that stood out to me the most was Stoicism. And in Stoicism, the concept is there are factors. There are external factors and internal factors. So the external is the outside world, things that just happen, things that are out of our control. And then the internal factors. What do we do to react to those external factors? How does the outside world affect us? And so when you look at Stoicism, there are things that you don't have control over, but what you always have control over is how you react to it and what you do in those situations. So having that understanding of your capability to always be in control of your actions is self-mastery. And so, it takes that self-mastery to get to the point where you can be your authentic self. Even though, if you react to a situation a certain way authentically, you can be authentic but still lead yourself into bad situations because you don't have that discipline yet to know how to react in a certain way that's still authentic but also will lead to a positive outcome. Because, again, we're talking about solutions. We don't want to, continue to perpetuate violence and continue to perpetuate these things that are hurting our community. We, as men, want to be the ones that help heal our community and uplift our community. So it all boils down to our own actions and what we do, regardless of the environment that we're in. So, there are a lot of excuses that we could use, but at the end of the day, it's all about how you react and, what you do with the cards that you're dealt. So just getting back to, your expertise.
I would change one thing he said. I would change the word from react to respond, right? Because react is sometimes it's this. Respond means that you're very judicious in how you move. So everything he said was right on point. I would just change it from react to respond. When we respond, we normally do things with intention. When we react, sometimes we don't. And again, we're just human, so there are times when we will just react. But the more he talked about mastery, the more you can master who you are, the more you are intentional about who you are. And we have to have practices. So again, and I'm going to come to your question, but again, I get up in the morning, I meditate. I get up in the morning, my soundtrack is a bird. I get up in the morning, I walk on my grass, barefooted. I do things intentionally every day to ground myself as I get ready to move about, And so as I surrender to the uncertainties of the world, I am in control, I am safe, and I am guided. That's something that I always use.
So, do you think it's possible for a person to stop cursing? Because in the world, they be like, don't curse. It's like life kind of gives these are expressed words, you know the words I'm talking about. So it's do you think it's possible for a person to stop cursing?
Anything is possible if that's what you want to do. I mean, I'm not going to tell you to curse or not to curse, but if cursing is your, as I say, your kryptonite, I ain't mad at you because sometimes words need to have a little expression to them. You know, so I mean, again, we just got to put things on a priority level, man. Is cursing the worst thing in the world? I don't personally think so. You know, but then if that's all you do, then that might be a problem. But you can do anything that you choose to do.
I stopped.
You start cursing? All right.
5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, because he used to curse like
I was cursing mofo.
Another thing too is I always keep in the back of my mind that it takes 3 weeks to break a habit. So if you set yourself a goal for that day, then you can stack your days. And then once you get to 21 days, it'll be a lot easier to not even have to focus on creating that intentional energy because now you're starting to get used to whatever you set yourself up to. But it's all about taking these phases, and you could break it down every day. Or I won't curse until lunch, because obviously you're gonna slip up. You know, you're gonna be in a situation where you're not thinking that intention is in the back of your brain, and you're gonna slip up. But if you create phases, all right, I won't curse for the rest of the day until I go to sleep. Then you can start to build up where then it would be 3 weeks and the habit would be broken. So you know everything is possible. You gotta be self-aware. So that's a practice as well. So it looks like we have another online comment.
Oh yeah, we have some online comments. Someone said they're tuning in from Atlanta.
ATL.
Claudia said, great discussion. We are all born with a purpose, which is forgotten because of what you described in your book. We need to see that humanity in each one of the young men we see. Arnold Murray said, thank you for this platform. Who is the man on stage next to Reginald Williams?
So I can introduce myself again. I am Isaac Alicia. I'm a rising senior at Howard University. I study business management. I come from King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. I'm a community member. That's how I like to describe myself. So I work here at Sankofa Video and Books. Shout out to Sankofa. You know, this place has really accepted me as a home. I work at Aurora Market, which is a small grocery store, helping to eliminate food deserts in DC, you know, providing fresh food to the community. I'm a teacher. I teach high school students in DC, you know, not only things like data analytics and math, but also how to present themselves, present their ideas, communicate, and how to carry themselves in and out of the classroom. I'm a musician. I'm a creative, so I make music. My focus is on positivity and how we can heal our community through our artistic expression. So me and my creative team, we have this concept called artivism, which is social activism through artistic expression. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the art that we consume influences us, influences how we think about ourselves, influences our language, how we treat other people. So when we put that positive energy into our music, then we create positive outputs into our community. So it's really a way to help heal our community and you know, bring up the youth, but also just influence those around us. So I do a lot within the community. I'm also a mentor. So at Howard University, I'm executive director of a mentorship organization called Men of the Mecca Initiative, founded under the Office of the President to increase the graduation rate of males on campus. So, you know, the proportions of black men graduating college or even high school in this nation is extremely skewed. We are, you know, the lowest graduating, you know, the lowest academic performing, but, you know, the way to get through that is by utilizing each other as a resource and as a guide for each other. You know, by becoming those role models in our communities, because you know black boys have eyes, right, and they're gonna see what's in front of them. So we have to do our part, you know, as capable men to show them, you know, the correct way to navigate this world. And so that's really who I am.
Go me. Okay. Claudia said, no matter how they are showing up, I would love to talk with both of you, with both or one of you about the programs that I know of that are working with Black boys in marginalized communities in DC that are helping these young men tell their stories and move through the trauma to live their purpose. The connections are being made in the comments right now. And also, someone asked for you to drop your IG, Isaac.
Okay, so for the IG question, so my IG is my producer name. So I go by the creative name of Icy Tides. So they call me Icy Tides because I like jewelry. And then I also got waves under this fitted. So they call me Icy Tides. So you can find me on Instagram at Icy Tides _. So that's ICYTIDES _. And then for the question about, engaging young Black boys, a lot of what I just spoke about kind of answers that question, becoming that role model and that mentor in our communities. I would say a specific example of that is this charity event that we do every year on Howard's campus called Black Men Feed DC. And so what we do is we encourage all of the Black men within our communities to, either donate their resources or their time. And, one day during the year, we want to create more days like this, but currently it's one day annually where we order enough materials to make 1,000 sandwiches. So we'll have a lot of Howard students, a lot of Howard men meet in Drew Hall on Howard's campus, and we'll just have like 2,000 sandwich buns, like a whole bunch of different sandwich options, whether it's meat or other sandwich options, and we'll come together, make 1,000 sandwiches, and then spread out across the city, send groups north, south, east, west, and just hand out food to the homeless. And that's a great way to network, but it's also an opportunity for us to set the example and to be the change that we want to see. So a lot of things in life require momentum, and it's all about getting the ball rolling. It's a lot easier to continue something once it's started. So I hope to inspire you to do something similar wherever you guys are tuning in from. And then if you want to mention
before we leave, I'll give my telephone number and email address, and they can hook up with me. Because I forgot what the question was.
Are there any more online questions?
Calvin Mann said, my brother.
So I got to shout out to Calvin Mann. This is a brother out of Detroit, Michigan. The good fathers, and then encouraged me. I'm young. He's a pioneer in this. I'm a baby in this. I've been doing this like 21, 22 years. Calvin's doing it about 35, 36 years. And this brother's making it happen in Detroit. So shout out to Calvin.
That's what's up. So I want to ask you, do you have any podcasts that you like to listen to, or any recommendations for us to, have those influences in our life, things that we can kind of subscribe to help us, remain on this path?
So I'm going to tell Calvin to drop his podcast in
There
the
you
chat.
go.
I'm kind of, anything on television or, I'm kind of in and out. I'm constantly writing, so I don't listen to things as much as I should, but they're definitely out there.
Did he drop it in the chat?
Calvin Mann said, we had Howard here doing great things last year on spring break.
That's right. HU. I'm trying to remember what I did for spring break last year. I know I did something out of the ordinary. I don't think I went on vacation.
It must not have been that exciting. You don't remember.
Oh no, I remember. So I went to I traveled to New York with my friends, and one of the things that we did a lot, we spent like 3 or 4 days out in Manhattan, and we're all musicians, we're all artists, so we basically spent the whole trip just like walking around the whole city, just like freestyling. Like we was rapping on the train, and every time we would encounter like street musicians, we would stand there and rap, and people would like crowd around, and just sharing that energy. That was a fun spring break.
Hey, don't be shy about sharing the gift, man.
Yeah.
Never that. There's this thing I always say to kids, man, and actually I'm gonna start saying it to adults as well. You were created a masterpiece. Don't live your life as a carbon copy. So,
That actually is funny because when I was reading your book, one thing I realized is you really have a whole catalog of quotes. Like you're just like a quote generator. So how do you come up with these quotes? Like, do you just hear a lot of things and store them, or do you just come up with them on the spot?
a lot of sometimes is you hear something like again. I got to shout him out. If you listen to Calvin and you don't come away with something, or something wrong with you. But I hear one thing and it'll spark something else. And again, I think it's. I have to go back. I think it's this being an heir of my grandfather, because my grandfather would say, like, I remember one time my grandmother came home and she had been having some issues with the women at work, and like this wasn't the first time my grandfather had heard this issue, and he said to her, my grandmother's name was Lella. He said, Lella, it seems like to me you're expecting the cat to be a dog. And it was like simple, and I really didn't get it at that time, but he would just say these simple things. So I just kind of, sometimes I hear one thing and it'll spark something else. But it's, I don't know, but I do have a few.
And another thing too is like you could really say anything that doesn't mean anything, but the way you say it will prompt someone to think deeply about the situation to the point where they'll have a better understanding of it, even though what you just said doesn't even make any sense. So.
I'm always trying to push thought, right? And I'll say things that don't mean anything just to see what kind. I remember one time I had this kid in my class. He was actually in an adult class, and he wouldn't say anything. And normally that doesn't bother me, right? But like we're 6 weeks into this thing, man, and this kid hasn't said anything. I'm like, 6 weeks and you ain't said nothing? And so I saw all the tats on his arm, and so I kind of knew who he was involved with based off of the tats. And and it wasn't even planned. I walked in the classroom, like, come down the elevator, I walk in the class, and as I walk in the class, this is what God told me to say. And I said this. I said, whoever walks around with a gun is a B. And the kid looked up and said, how so? And we ended up having a conversation, just he and I, amongst the class for 20 minutes. But that got him. So I just, I have a way of, I don't know, it ain't me. It's just listening to the voices that are still within me. But again, it comes from my granddad.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely listen to God, for real. But I also want to ask you about just how, your book, since it's been released, how has it been received? What kind of support have you seen?
I have had, I released my book right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I didn't know how we were going to do what we were going to do. The book has been received well. I share this story all the time. If you look at my signature, I tell where the book was a 2021 a candidate for nomination for an NAACP Image Award. I didn't get the nomination, right? Which was cool. But what happened was about a week or so after I got the word that I didn't get the nomination, I got a FedEx envelope, and it had about 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 letters in there from offenders in Ridgeland Correction Facility in Ridgeland, South Carolina. And those letters was talking about how that book affected them. And that right there was like the greatest compliment. Like the NAACP award could not beat having that. So it has been well received. It's been well received.
That's awesome. And then I also noticed that you got the merch on too. So what was the process of you getting those, the shirts? Do you have, is it just shirts or do you have other products as well?
Shirts, sweats. I don't have anything right now, but we have shirts, sweats, and hats.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going through, merch is not the number one thing, but we're going through a rephase. So yeah, some new merch will be coming out.
Absolutely. And what we were talking about before too is the power of community and a network. People who have, been blessed with the opportunity to be exposed to, this content in this book, know, what it truly means. So definitely, I would just suggest to get out there, push yourself, go to these, different events, engage with your community, because you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know what that's going to lead to. So definitely support each other. Support yourself first, but support each other. So is there any way, maybe a website or your social media or any way that we can continue to support and follow you?
Sure. My IG is Mr. Mr. Reginald Williams. So it's really easy, Mr. Reginald Williams. Telephone number is 240-603-6454. And if you want to email me, you can email me at bookreggie@reginaldwilliams.org.
That's right. You heard it here first. Book this man. We're going to have a great conversation. So is there anything that we haven't touched upon during this conversation that you want to make sure has been highlighted before we leave out of here today?
I do. I don't know why this kind of just came to mind, right? When we look at the trials and tribulations that young black boys go through, if we look at a biblical context, I tell people all the time, you don't have to believe the Bible. I'm not an evangelist, so if you don't want to believe the Bible, that's up to you, right? But if you look at a biblical context of the Bible, and you just believe the story, or not believe the story, you just read the story, let's look at Jesus. Jesus was born to a teenage mother whose father, God, did not have a physical presence, right? He was born into some impoverished situation because he was placed in a manger, right? That's a feeding trough, right? King Herod knew his power and was scared of him and said that all the boys 2 years and under in the region of Babylon should be murdered, right? So in other words, at a very early age, black boys are valuable, right? Move forward, Jesus at 12 years old went on the Passover with his parents. And when they left him, right? And they didn't realize that they left him. But when they went back to the place to find him, what they said to him was, look what you did to us. They didn't say, man, we messed up and left you. They said, look what you did to us. Marginalization, right? If we move further up, right, Jesus was committing these miracles. And for real, his boys and the people really wasn't quite sure how to take this, wasn't how to take him, right? He had some boys, his disciples. One of them snitched on him, right? One of them said, I will never forsake you, and denied him 3 times. When he was in the garden, right, and the soldiers came, I call him SWAT. He said, man, we could have had this conversation earlier. You brought all these dudes to come get me? And his crime was just basically for being who he is. I am who I am. Yeah. And the governor knew he was innocent, but yet still said, hey, look, whatever y'all want to do with him, do with him. And he was dead at 33. Violent crime or death by homicide is greatest amongst 15 and 34, right? So when you look at black boys today, it is no different than what Jesus went through however many years ago. And we need to begin to recognize that there is an attack against young black boys, right? Again, I'm not saying it's not, in the beginning, in the introduction of my book, I talk about marginalization. Everyone is marginalized except white men, right? But I am speaking for black boys because I am a black man. I had not an interview, I was on a radio show one time, and a man called in and said he says, I'm 63 years old, and I've been waiting all my life to hear what you just said. Yeah. That broke my heart, because that man has lived all of his life waiting to be affirmed, and he had to be affirmed by somebody he didn't even know, which was me. And so I just need for the world to understand that there is a conscious attack on black boys. And as long as we continue to allow the world to attack them, they will continue then to attack our neighborhoods. They will then begin to attack our girls. They will then begin to attack who we are. And so I just want people to, I'm not asking for any special treatment for black boys, but just understand that look, when the enemy goes to war, they go to war and they try to attack what they feel is the strongest.
Yep.
So I just want the world to know that young black boys need a voice, and when they're talking, stop marginalizing them.
That's real. Yeah, that's real for sure. And then one thing I want to just say to that point too is, these attacks definitely are real. The weapon has been formed, but it won't prosper. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be able to understand that you're going to go through these things in life where everything is going to try to lead you down the wrong path. Everything is going to try to harm you. But once you understand that you have a purpose and that you are rooted in that purpose and you can't be not to the left or to the right, that purpose becomes your protection, because you're going to put yourself in the right places at the right times instead of putting yourself at the wrong place at the wrong time. So just know that these weapons, they will try to harm you, and they can harm you at certain times, but it won't prosper. It will never get the job done, especially when you have that community and that support around you as well. So just continue to seek out these mentors, continue to be a mentor to those around you, and you're gonna start to realize that your life is gonna begin to reciprocate the energy that you put out, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. There's a lot of people that don't do anything with their life, good or bad, and they don't get anything out of their life. So just choose greatness, because it's within us all. Like you mentioned, you looking at Jesus' story. He was murdered, but he wasn't killed. So just continue to just be your authentic self, but also be rooted in that purpose. And if you aren't sure what your purpose is yet, just continue to trust your gut and seek out those brothers in your community that you can see the light in them, because they'll help you find your way. They'll help you find your path. So read the book, listen to the podcast, continue to engage with Sankofa, because there are these beams of light that exist all around the world that will help illuminate your own purpose. So that's definitely something that I want to impart as well, as we begin to close this out. Are there any more questions, either online or in person?
Yes. So someone wants you to run back your info again, Reginald.
Okay, my IG is Mr. Reginald Williams. My email address is bookreggie@reginaldwilliams.org. My telephone number is 240-603-6454. If you are in the DMV, and for those who live here know what the DMV stands for, you can come to Sankofa and purchase a book. But if you're somewhere else, you can go online at amvonlinestore.com to purchase your book. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Isaac and Christina and Malika and everyone who's allowed me the opportunity to share the stage.
Absolutely. We thank you for, sharing your experience, sharing your wisdom, being a mentor and, affecting this world with your writing, with your speaking, with the classes that you do, these events that you're doing. Like you mentioned, someone needs to hear what you have to say. And when you have the strength to say it, you can really change lives. So let's all just keep that in mind. Let's all just, really reflect on what we spoke about today, what we've learned from this conversation. I know I will. And so allow this to help you grow. If you've just been a part of this conversation, don't let it be for nothing. You know what I'm saying? Try to really figure out what resonated with you the most and why, because chances are that's what you need to do next. So before we do close out, I just want to ask you what's next for you. Do you have any plans for the future, or and it's okay if you don't, because a lot of times, most of the time, it's hard to know what's next. But what's next for you?
That great question and a great statement. I don't know. I got out of direct services because direct services would just beat me up, to be honest with you. And a lot of that has to do with the book. I actually just finished another book, but I'm not going to tell you what that's about right now. But I want to continue, more than anything else, I want to continue to build in these tribes. And so you and I are going to connect after this. And every time I go to a space, man, I'm just trying to connect with the people in that space. Because as you said, it has to be about community. And if we look historically, our success has always been because we've had community. And so, you know, sometimes we have to have community within community, you know. So it's about connecting. And I told Calvin this when we talked last week. It's about connecting with people in DC who I can then connect with people in King of Persia, who I then can connect with people in Detroit, Michigan, who I then, you know, and even if it's a small group, man, we just get together and we know that we can support each other and everything. So the thing that I want to do, and I can't tell you that I know how to do it right now, is I want to build systems. Get out of the program. Now, I've been in the program business for 20 years. I want to get into a space where I'm building systems or be a part of building systems. And so having young brothers like yourself is important to the things I'm trying to do. Having the old heads like Calvin is important to things I have to do. I don't know if my man Emmanuel is on out of Lima, Ohio. They brought me to Lima back in October of last year, man, and treated me like an absolute king, man. Like, treated me like who. So just trying to everywhere I go, man, just make sure that, you know, beginning of building the tribe.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I agree completely. I always say that your network is your net worth, and you know, your relationships never die, your legacy never dies, and how you treat people will live on forever. And you know, you could be that person that, you know, becomes a role model for someone else. I know I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have someone to look to and understand that, okay, they're doing something right. What is it? And how can I do that? And so, you know, be observant. Understand your surroundings. Understand where you are, you know, internally, and how can you get to that point of self-mastery. And so that looks like this. That looks like, you know, conversating with people that have, you know, experiences, and, you know, expressing your thoughts with the intention to learn. So definitely what I learned today is, you know, we don't react, we respond, right? So let's respond by, you know, just giving a hand to Reginald Williams for this amazing conversation. So with that, I'm gonna call the close for this event. Feel free to, again, you know, engage with this book, engage with the community, and thank you again for stopping by and, you know, engaging with us. So we appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Can we get one more round of applause?